My grandpa Brian struggled with a speech disorder since he was a small boy. He couldn't speak clearly, making it difficult for those around him to understand him. For example, he would talk in third person and it would be really difficult to understand him. I don't know how far away his birthday was from his due date, I just know he had a speech disorder. Studies have shown that if a baby is born prematurely, they are at risk of having a speech impairment. According to UK Healthcare from 2023, all babies that are born prematurely, 4 to 6 weeks early, are at risk of having serious health problems. Some have breathing problems, feeding problems, and effects on brain functions. Others can be born with speech impairments. I was born 4 weeks and 6 days from my due date, and I weighed 6 pounds and 2 ounces. Since I was born that early, I won the speech impairment lottery. Being born prematurely can cause your language development to be delayed. Raising Children Network 2024 says, most premature babies develop language in the same way as term babies, but their language development might be delayed. They might have more trouble speaking and understanding what's said to them compared to babies that were born at term. Not only can you get a speech impairment from being a baby, speech impairments run through the family blood and affect how people say different sounds. Some people can't say the L sound or the R sound. I started with not being able to say the L, TH, SH, CH, and R sounds. It took me 13 years to be able to say these sounds, and the R sound is what I most struggled with. So, when a sentence like this came up in a read aloud in 4th grade, people with speech disorders are usually overlooked. Today, we start with talking about what a speech disorder is, the different types, and how people struggle with them. Next, we'll talk about how a person gets a speech disorder. Lastly, we'll end with talking about different types of treatments for speech disorders. First, let's start with what a speech disorder is. Cleveland Clinic 2023 says speech impairment or speech disorder happens when your child can't speak or can speak so people understand what they're saying. To just isn't one type of speech disorder, there are multiple different kinds. For example, I have a speech impairment. My grandpa had illism. Illism is not a speech disorder in the traditional sense, but can be used for emotional regulation and development phase in children. Emil from Sesame Street also has it. Other types of speech disorders include stuttering, lisp, expectancy, and hysteria. Speech impairment is an inability to produce certain speech sounds. Elmer Fudd had a speech impairment known as ricosism, which is the inability to pronounce the letter R. This is a specific type of speech impairment where the R sounds are replaced, most commonly with W sounds, as where he says rabbit for rabbit. Ricosism can also affect the pronunciation of L sounds, or the W sounds, the most prononistic characteristic of Emily's speech pattern. Stuttering includes repeating words or sounds, blocking out what you want to say because you have a difficulty with sound and stretching out words. Stuttering isn't always based on genetics. People can stutter based on their feelings, like being frustrated. President Joe Biden had a stutter during his presidential debates. A lisp is where a person struggles with saying S or Z. It can cause a slushy or spitty sound during speech. Donald Duck has a lisp. Expectancy refers to the impairment of motor speech sounds that affect an individual's ability to form the sound of speech correctly. Dysphagia is a muscle weakness in a person's face, lips, tongue, throat, or chest. Symptoms may include slurred speech, speaking too fast, and trouble participating in conversations. People with speech disorder have more trouble socializing, especially young children. When I was younger, I got frustrated at people if they didn't understand me when I tried to tell them something. Young children tend to show their feelings by getting upset when someone can't understand them. Teens and adults don't show their feelings, but they become more aware of their troubles with communication skills. They get bullied and people think that they are dumb. The National Library of Medicine conducted a study to explore the communication and social interactions and experience of isolants with motor speech disorders and concluded that participants reported that the impact of congenital motor speech disorders on social interactions and experience become more apparent in isolants than in earlier childhood. Teens become more aware of their social interactions because young children sometimes haven't fully grasped the idea of a speech disorder. Since young children don't fully grasp the concept, they tend to show their feelings. They can end up yelling to the person they're talking to if they can't understand them. 1 in 10 school-age children go to speech therapy to help with their speech disorder. They are given exercises such as tongue movements or flashcards to help them. 75% have their speech disorders resolved by the end of high school. So, did you just win the speech impairment lottery? Good news, you can either be born with it or get it later in life. List off factors can make a person be born with a speech disorder. These include being born prematurely, having a low birth rate, and it can run through the family. Having a low birth rate can cause you to have a low performance of oral and written language. Low birth rate children also receive therapy rather than a normal birth rate child. A survey found a low birth rate linked to communication problems in children says, compared to children who were born at a normal birth rate, low birth rate children were 2 to 3 times more likely to have received speech language therapy. While about 14.5% of children with a normal birth rate receive speech language therapy by age 10, about 28% of children with a history of moderately or very low birth rate, and 39% of kids with extremely low birth rate have received therapy. Speech disorders can run through the family blood, but they don't get passed down every generation. My grandpa had one, and I had one, but my parents nor my sister never had a speech disorder. The FOXP2 gene is a gene that provides instructions to make the protein. The inheritance of the gene depends on the specific genetic change that has happened. Even if a person has a speech disorder now, but they weren't born with it, they can get one later in life. One factor that causes you to get a speech disorder is having a stroke. The Stroke Association says, when we communicate, our brains has to complete a series of tasks. Different parts of our brains are responsible for each one of these tasks. If one of these problems is damaged by a stroke, it can cause problems with communication. Now, this isn't true for everybody. My older sister had a stroke when she was just a few hours old, but she never had a speech disorder. She does stutter every once in a while, but it's not every day that affects her. Having a traumatic brain injury can also cause you to have a speech disorder. It can cause you to have trouble speaking, understanding speech, and trouble participating in conversations. Now, let's look at some treatments for speech disorders. These include speech therapy exercises and physical exercises that focus on strengthening the muscles that produce speech sounds. These include target selection, contextual visualization, constant therapy or motor therapy, ear devices, and medication. Target selection is a process of choosing specific sounds, words, or skills to work on to improve a speech disorder. Contextual visualization is used to improve speech sound production by accompanying the natural contents of language. Content therapy is a digital thematic application that provides evidence-based speech, language, and cognitive exercises for people recovering from a stroke, traumatic brain injury, or living with conditions like Alzheimer's or dementia. Oral motor therapy is a type of treatment that aims to improve the strength, coordination, and control of muscles in the mouth, including the lips, tongue, plate, and jaw. Ear devices are used for assorted listening devices, like FM systems, to help with sound clarifying and use augmented alternative communication devices to supplement or replace speech. Medication is used by addressing underlying conditions that affect speech, such as ADHD medications, improving focus by directly treating speech disorder like Alzheimer's through drugs that may enhance brain recovery or function. Today, we talked about what a speech disorder is, the different types, and how people struggle with them. Next, we talked about how people get a speech disorder. Lastly, we ended with talking about different treatments for speech disorders. Everybody struggles with something. Most people struggle with speech disorders. It may limit people not to be able to say certain words or sounds, but it don't let it stop them. My speech impairment didn't stop me from going out for speech and debate. It made me a more confident speaker. People are not defined by having speech disorders. As it says in the 1946 murder mystery, Murder in a Glass Room by Lester Fuller and Eden Roof, you can never tell a book by its cover.